Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma.
Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that?
We should have a ceasefire now.
שאנחנו צריכים להבטיח ולהבטיח את גבולנו המזרחי מול ירדן. זה גבול של שלום.
Joe Biden's appeals are falling on deaf ears. Israel is expanding the war. After Gaza, it has launched an operation in Lebanon, a ground offensive, the first of its kind since 2006. Israeli troops have been mobilized for what they're calling a limited operation. The IDF, or the Israeli Defense Force, says that it is conducting targeted raids along the border and its troops are yet to enter Lebanon. But it may just be a matter of time because Lebanon already looks like a war zone, coming under a full-scale assault.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. بنت الصراط بس.
How many soldiers are part of this operation? Israel says it has deployed one army division. Typically, one division has more than 10,000 troops. The IDF has not confirmed any numbers, but the pictures speak for themselves. This appears to be a large-scale attack. Israel is also conducting airstrikes. But there are no reports of direct clashes yet. Clashes between Israeli troops and Hezbollah fighters. No reports of that yet. Israel says it is striking Lebanon from outside the border, and Hezbollah says the same, that no Israeli soldier has entered Lebanon yet. Last night, some pictures surfaced on social media. Take a look at this first. Now, we haven't been able to verify this, but these are Lebanese troops. Apparently, they were deployed near the southern border. Early reports claimed that Lebanon had pulled these soldiers back or that they left their posts. But a few hours ago, the Lebanese military has denied all such reports. They said that the troops were not pulled back. Instead, they were simply redeployed. They could be preparing for a bigger attack from Israel. That's the Lebanese version. Meanwhile, the IDF is asking locals to vacate the border areas, especially in southern Lebanon that shares the border with Israel, southern Lebanon. The Israeli military has issued warnings to locals there, to residents in at least 30 villages, asking them to leave. Save your lives. That was the message from the Israeli military spokesperson. He posted it in Arabic on social media. Save your lives. More than 1 million people have already been displaced in Lebanon. Israel has been pounding Beirut as well. That's the capital city of Lebanon. They say that they're going after the Hezbollah and dismantling their bases.
Hezbollah turned Lebanese villages next to Israeli villages into military bases, all ready for an attack on Israel. Hezbollah had prepared to use those villages as staging grounds for an October 7th style invasion into Israeli homes.
The entire situation is spinning out of control. Israel's operations have raised tensions across the region. They've sparked clashes in the West Bank. Israel conducted a military raid there too. In the West Bank, there was an exchange of fire. The locals fired upon Israeli forces and the Israeli army retaliated. At least one Palestinian is dead and 4 Israeli soldiers are injured. Israel is also defending itself against a barrage of rockets. Look at this map. It was published by their Air Force. There are red marks everywhere, pretty much covering the entire Israeli territory. Its air defense system intercepted rockets in all these areas. Air raid sirens were heard across Israel through the day today. These rockets came from the north. They were fired by the Hezbollah. They did not cause any significant damage, but they delivered a clear message from the Lebanese side. Israel may have taken out top Hezbollah commanders, including its leader Hassan Nasrallah. Israel may have left the Hezbollah weakened, but it is not defenseless. That was the message. That's what these rockets were supposed to convey. They were a demonstration of the Hezbollah's capabilities, proof that they can strike targets deep inside Israel. You see, Hezbollah still has long-range rockets in its arsenal, and it's not afraid to use them. In fact, that's the mood in Beirut as well.
In my opinion, there is only a small possibility that Israel will be able to penetrate because the resistance remains strong. And if Sayed Hassan Nasrallah is gone, there are thousands of alternatives to Hassan Nasrallah.
The Zionist entity is doomed to collapse, and the martyr Hassan Nasrallah, God rest his soul, said something beautiful. He said hello and welcome because Israel will not finish what they started.
The Hezbollah is getting support from Yemen as well, from the Houthi rebels in Yemen. They launched drones towards Israel today. The Houthis targeted two Israeli cities, Tel Aviv and Eilat. The Houthis say that they were aiming for Israeli military posts.
The drone forces of the Yemeni armed forces targeted a military target belonging to the Israeli enemy in the occupied Jaffa area, using a Jaffa-type drone. It also targeted military targets in the al-Rashrash, Eilat area with 4 Samad 4-type drones. By the grace of God Almighty, both operations successfully achieved their objectives.
The Houthis claim that their mission was successful, but Israel has countered the claim. The IDF says that it intercepted Houthi drones. Irrespective, Netanyahu knows that enemy attacks are far from over. If Israel keeps striking Lebanon, Iran and its proxies will hit back. But will they be able to cause any damage? That's our next story. Israel's actions have not been legal, nor have they been responsible. But you cannot deny that they have been effective. Just consider the last 2 months. First, Israel killed the Hamas chief in Tehran. Then they killed the Hezbollah chief in Beirut. This is deep inside enemy territory. To attack with such precision is quite impressive. The question is, how did they do it? How did Israel do it? Thanks to a vast network of espionage. We're talking about multiple moving parts here. You've got cyber surveillance, you've got satellite images, you've got moles and double agents, all of them combined to pinpoint these targets. Let's look at each of these parts. The first is cyber espionage. Let me take you back to the year 2006. Israel and Hezbollah fought to a standstill. After 34 days of war, there was no clear victor. Israeli agencies felt humiliated and disappointed, so they quickly got to work. Their military has a special unit called Unit 8200. Its job is to collect enemy information. How? By intercepting cell phone messages or hacking mobile devices. After the 2006 war, this unit went into overdrive. They developed cutting-edge spying devices. Now, Hezbollah did suspect this, which is why they turned to pagers instead of mobile phones. They started using pagers, but Israel was one step ahead of them. They set up a shell company to supply these pagers to Hezbollah. After that, it was a question of sabotaging them, putting bombs in and shipping them. Chances are this was a cross-agency operation. The Mossad, the Israeli Defense Forces, the Unit 8200, all of them coordinated to complete it. And that's a feature of Israeli intelligence. Yes, there are multiple agencies, but the work is seamless. There is great coordination between them. Now, coming back to Lebanon, Israel's new focus gave them results. In 2008, they killed a top Hezbollah leader, Imad Mughniya. In 2020, they traced Iran's Qasem Soleimani to Beirut and then to Baghdad. And in July this year, they killed a Hezbollah commander, Fuad Shukur, all thanks to intelligence, which brings us to the second part of Israel's campaign, penetration, moles and double agents. Israel specializes in this sort of stuff. It's called human intelligence or HUMINT. Using individuals in the enemy ranks to gather intelligence. That's what it is. Israel's been doing it for a while. In the 1960s, they had a spy in Syria, Eli Cohen. In the 1980s, they had one in Egypt, Ashraf Marwan. He tipped them off about the Yom Kippur War. But how does Israel manage this network? Creating a few moles is hard enough. Israel is said to have dozens, possibly hundreds of moles. Of course, their tactics are mostly classified, but intelligence leaks do give us an idea of how they do it. The honey trap is a usual tactic. Israel uses prostitutes to lure their targets, photographs them, and then uses the pictures as leverage. They also send agents abroad to seduce certain officials, like secretaries at embassies or even flight attendants. The idea is to keep tabs on who's flying in and out. And finally, they use money. Israel pays their moles and double agents quite well. Consider Ashraf Marwan, the spy in Egypt. He got between $50,000 and $100,000 for every tip-off, plus bonuses and gifts. A lot of these officials are sanctioned by the West. They live on meager government salaries, so such payments may sound lucrative. And look at the result. Iran's former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, has made a revelation. He said that Iran has a special unit to tackle Israeli moles. Iran has a special unit to tackle Israeli moles, but guess what? The man heading that unit was himself an Israeli mole. So were 20 others with him. Now, Ahmadinejad may not be a reliable source. He has a history of wild statements, but he's not alone in saying this. A former foreign minister said the same thing in 2021. He said Israel had penetrated the upper echelons of Iran's regime. So to sum it up, Israel has done many things right. First, they have invested in intelligence. Israel allocates more than $2 billion to Mossad. They are well funded and well staffed. Secondly, they keep up with the times. They've used letter bombs, armed drones, exploding cell phones, exploding pagers, exploding motorcycles. You name it, they've done it. And third, patience. Intelligence is often a long-term game. Like I said, they began focusing on the Hezbollah way back in 2006. They've been tracking Nasrallah all along. But when did that investment come in handy? Nearly 18 years later. Israel has been willing to get its hands dirty to walk on the moral grey area, but things don't always go to plan. Like what happened on October 7, 2023, last year. Israel was blindsided by the Hamas attack, so intelligence is not always 100% accurate. Even when you get a tip-off, it can be wrong. Which brings us to the fourth thing that Israel does. They take risks. A lot of governments may think twice about such attacks. They may not act on such intel, but Israel does. Their leadership is willing to gamble. When it pays off, Israel looks invincible. And when it doesn't, their Western godfathers mop up after them. The leader who keeps coming back from election defeats, from corruption cases and from grave strategic mistakes. Benjamin Netanyahu is arguably the biggest comeback kid. But that's not necessarily a good thing because his comebacks have come at a cost. A cost not borne by him, but by innocent people in West Asia. First, some background. Benjamin Netanyahu has pitched himself as Mr. Security, the leader who would always protect Israel. But that image took a beating on October 7th last year. On his watch, Hamas attacked Israel. They killed more than 1,700 innocent civilians, also took hundreds of people hostage. Immediately, Netanyahu's approval ratings plunged. Only 15% Israelis wanted him to keep the job. The rest wanted him to step aside, to resign. So what did Netanyahu do? He went rogue, even ignored his most important ally, the US. Their President Biden had set many red lines for Netanyahu, like don't invade Rafah, don't attack civilian infrastructure, and don't hold up humanitarian aid. But Netanyahu ignored all of it. When the US negotiated a ceasefire, he rejected that too. Many Israelis wanted Netanyahu to take the deal, especially the families of hostages. But he was defiant. He said the war would go on. Then midway into 2024, he expanded it, the war. Netanyahu began targeting Iranian assets in the region, even took out some Iranian commanders. This triggered the first ever direct attack by Tehran on Israel. Again, Netanyahu was unfazed. He killed the Hamas chief in Tehran and he killed the Hezbollah chief in Lebanon. The US had explicitly warned against that last operation, killing the Hezbollah chief. They feared that killing Nasrallah would trigger war. So what did Netanyahu do? He did not tell Biden at all. He ordered the strike from New York on American soil. He used American bombs to kill Nasrallah, and then he informed Biden afterwards. Talk about utter disrespect. Netanyahu has played Biden like a fiddle. Just consider the recent ceasefire call. 12 nations came together to release that statement. It asked Israel and Hezbollah to stop fighting for 21 days. Privately, Netanyahu said okay, but when the statement was released, he backtracked. He said there would be no ceasefire in the north. For good measure, he also killed the Hezbollah chief. And the strange part? These rogue tactics are helping him. Assume that general elections are held today in Israel. Polls show that Netanyahu's party will emerge as the biggest. He may not win outright, but he will be the biggest player. Around 38% Israelis now support him. That's more than double from last year. Even his rivals realize that the tide is turning. One of them, Gideon Sa'ar, has joined Netanyahu's coalition. It takes his strength to 68 seats in Israel's parliament. That's 68 out of 120 seats in the Knesset. Now, just to be clear, this does not mean the war in Gaza is popular in Israel. Most Israelis still want a hostage deal. Yesterday, a major protest was held outside Netanyahu's residence. They asked him to end the war in Gaza.
We came to the house of the Prime Minister of Israel to tell him that we expect him to turn the military achievements into a deal that will return all of the hostages, 101 hostages, back home.
So they're saying end the war in Gaza, but attacks elsewhere are popular in Israel, especially in Lebanon, attacks in Lebanon. Hezbollah have been firing rockets at Israel since October last year. As a result, 70,000 Israelis have been displaced. For them to return home, Hezbollah must be dismantled. Hence, this newfound support for Netanyahu. Not many leaders could have pulled off this turnaround, but Netanyahu did, mainly because of two reasons. Number one, his appetite for escalation. Most countries in the world condemned him. His allies criticized him, yet he pushed on. He knew that he was killing innocent civilians in Gaza. Still, his strategy did not change. And reason number two, his understanding of American politics. You see, Netanyahu has spent a lot of time in the US. He's even studied in American colleges, so he understands Washington well. He knows which buttons to push. And that's why he ignored Joe Biden this whole time. He knew that it was election season in the US. The Jewish vote was always going to be crucial, so Biden simply could not abandon Israel. Netanyahu knew this, and he used that situation to his advantage. Like I said, he is the ultimate survivor, but history may not be kind to him. More than 40,000 Gazan civilians have paid for his comeback. Who knows how many Lebanese civilians will? Netanyahu's hunger for power has pushed West Asia into a wider war. It's a survival built on others' sacrifice. So Israel has invaded southern Lebanon. It's carrying out a ground offensive, but this is not their first time. In 1982, Israel tried something similar. It invaded Lebanon to push out the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And Israel succeeded. But the war gave birth to another enemy. That's the Hezbollah. In 2006, Israel went back into Lebanon to destroy them. They claimed victory in that war, but Hezbollah only emerged stronger. And now Israel is back to take care of it. But will this time be different? And what lessons can Israel learn from its previous wars? Our next report tells you.
It was the morning of June 6, 1982. 40,000 Israeli troops, along with hundreds of tanks, rolled into southern Lebanon. The goal was simple: push the Palestinian Liberation Organization away from the northern border. But as the conflict continued, the objective became more and more clear. Israel wanted to eradicate the PLO altogether, so soon they moved towards Beirut. West Beirut was the stronghold of Yasser Arafat's PLO. The organization fortified its positions, and thus began one of the most intense urban sieges in modern warfare. For nearly 3 months, Israeli forces pounded the city, from the air, the sea, and the land. Thousands were killed. Soon, the international outrage grew. There were calls for a ceasefire. A deal was struck. The PLO agreed to evacuate Beirut. Arafat and his fighters left for Tunisia. So Israel managed to achieve its goal. It drove the PLO out of Lebanon. But it gave birth to another enemy. Hezbollah grew from the ashes of the 1982 war, and their message was resistance. Israel may have ended the war, but it did not completely leave Lebanon. It carved a security zone to the north of their border. Israeli forces remained there, prompting the Hezbollah to target them frequently. Casualties mounted for Israel, and finally, in the year 2000, they made a decision. The then Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, ordered a unilateral withdrawal, and the Hezbollah took credit for it. There was relative calm for a few years, but in 2006, it escalated. Hezbollah attacked an Israeli patrol. It killed 3 soldiers and took 2 of them hostage. Israel called it an act of war. It wanted to wipe out the Hezbollah, and thus began a month-long conflict. Israel attacked Lebanon. Hezbollah hit back with rocket fire. Both sides lost hundreds. Over 1,200 Lebanese citizens were killed. It was devastating. But 34 days later came a ceasefire. While both sides declared victory, many took it as a win for Hezbollah. After all, Israel did not manage to achieve what they set out to do. So, 18 years later, they are back. Israel is in Lebanon to end Hezbollah again. But will this time be any different? Well, the recent successes have definitely boosted their confidence. Hassan Nasrallah is dead. The Hezbollah is leaderless. They have suffered multiple attacks. Israel sees this as an opportunity to double down. But any wrong move could be fatal. The Hezbollah may be down, but they are not out. They have fighters. They have a vast military arsenal. And a ground invasion is challenging. They'll be fighting the Hezbollah on their home turf. That too in close quarters. Plus, there's a chance history may repeat itself. Both in 1982 and 2006, Israel went into Lebanon for a limited ground operation. Both times, it expanded into a bigger and more deadly conflict. So Israel has to be careful here. its unsuccessful track record in Lebanon shows that it can't afford to overplay its hand once again.
These are troubling times for the world. 2 wars, major economic concerns, and generational advances in technology. India is not insulated from these challenges. Today, I spoke to the Army Chief of India, General Upendra Dwivedi, about all of this, about Israel's pager attacks on Hezbollah, the situation at the border with China, the violence in Manipur, and the use of artificial intelligence in warfare. The general offered some interesting assessments. He called Israel's attack a masterstroke. He said the China situation was stable but not normal. And he blamed false narratives for the chaos in Manipur. You can find the full conversation on our YouTube channel. Here's an excerpt. You took charge 3 months back, and it's been a period of churn for the neighborhood. Would you say that China is still the biggest security challenge for India, and how do you assess the situation at the border given the high levels of troop deployment and the tensions, and at the same time statements from the Chinese side saying there is progress and more convergence and fewer differences?
As far as China is concerned, it has been intriguing our mind for quite some time, and I keep saying with China you have to compete, you have to cooperate, you have to coexist, you have to confront and contest. So what's the situation today as we are looking at? The positive signaling is coming from the diplomatic side. But what we have to understand, the diplomatic side gives you the options and possibilities. But when it comes to the execution on ground, when it relates to the ground per se, it is dependent on the military commanders on both the sides to take those decisions. So what's the situation today? It's stable, but it's not normal and it's sensitive. So if that be the case, what are we wanting? We are wanting that the situation, what was there pre-April 2020, that should be restored back. So till the time that situation is not restored, as far as we are concerned, situation will remain sensitive, and we are fully operationally prepared to face any kind of a contingency which will come through. And in complete gamut, if we see, the trust has become the biggest casualty.
So do you see progress? Because that is the word that is being used a lot, that there is progress. Do you see a possible deal on, say, on Demchok or some other place?
We have come a long way, in the sense whatever were the low-hanging fruit, those have already been resolved. Now when it comes to the difficult situations where we have a different perception from both the sides, it means that both sides need to have in any negotiation win-win situation. So some kind of indication have been given from both the diplomatic side. Now the military side will sit together and see how this can be translated on ground. And when it comes, what is on the table? Everything which is we can think of, it's on the table along the northern front, and it also includes Depsang and Demchok.
You also visited Manipur last month, and Manipur has been gripped by ethnic violence for more than a year now, and it doesn't help them that they have a border that they share with Myanmar, which is dealing with its own problems, and there are concerns about a spillover. What is your assessment of the ground situation there?
In the lighter vein, ek ke saath ek free, because Manipur was a problem and now you have the Myanmar problem also coming in. So as far as Manipur problem of we see in May 2023, it all started with a rumor that there was a Anglo-Kuki War Centenary Gate which is being burnt. It was not being burnt. I have gone on ground and confirmed from everyone. Now that rumor mongering led to major violence which is still finding its kind of a stabilization phase which has not reached. So what has happened over a period of time? It has become a battle of narratives. There is a polarization between the communities. The situation may be stable today, but it is tensed.
Let's also talk about Jammu and Kashmir. They're having an election as we speak, and we've seen the security situation evolve over the past 5 years since the scrapping of Article 370. How do you describe things at the moment? And we've also seen that in the past, terror attacks were concentrated in Kashmir, but now there's a new wave of attacks in Jammu. What explains this shift?
So before I come to present situation, I must quote August 2019, what happened, you all are well aware. And thereafter went as an army commander, and Devendra Pandey is sitting here, who was the corps commander, and we met one of the ladies, wife of one of the active politicians. And she said, after this abrogation of Article 370, at least my children know when the principal tells that please draw the flag of the country when you come back tomorrow during the Independence Day. As you are aware, the two countries have Independence Day one day after the other. Now they are very clear that which country flag to be drawn. I feel we are moving towards peace and prosperity. We had concentrated on southern Kashmir most of the time. We had concentrated in some areas of Punch and, if I can say that, Jammu. So the areas which were left, if I'll not say totally unaddressed, but what was there, we were looking for most peace and prosperity because those places we could invest money. The development was forthcoming. Now those areas have been addressed now by the adversary, the country which is on the western border, and the terrorists which have come now are basically most of them foreign terrorists who have come, and they are going into these areas. Similarly, northern Kashmir also, these people are going into these areas. So what happened? We reoriented, re-energized, and refocused our forces which are there, security forces. But that's not important. What is more important, the police has gone in for a major revamp because our state will only stabilize if its police is effective. And that's what we are trying to empower.
Let's also talk about the war in West Asia, which is clearly expanding. I was coming this morning and I got a news flash that they've begun a ground offensive in Lebanon. The Israelis have become. Where do you think this is heading? And my second question on the same subject is that we've seen some disturbing precedents being set in this conflict, including the use of everyday gadgets and turning pagers and walkie-talkies into bombs, and it makes people think everywhere in the world that we're all carrying some gadget or the other at all points and we're all sitting ducks. So does India share this concern about these methods, and what are we doing to ensure that we are not at the receiving end of something like this?
In this case, Israel has decided very clearly that Hamas is primary focus which I must maintain. So what is done? He's completely, firstly, wiped out the Hamas opposition. Thereafter, he said, okay, let me see on the other side. And if you see the page of what you're talking about, it's a Taiwan company being supplied to Hungarian company thereafter giving it to them. The shell company which has been created is something which is a master stroke by Israelis. And for that, it requires years and years of preparation. So it means they were prepared for it. And that is what it counts, that the war does not start the way you start fighting. It starts the day you start planning. And this is what is most important.
Let's talk about the war in Ukraine. Russia is hiking its defense spending in 2025. It will be up by 25%, which means defense spending will account for over 6% of their GDP. This is the highest since the Cold War. But what explains this mammoth spending? Well, it could be the Russian economy. It looks resilient, but it is under pressure. Right now, the only thing sustaining the Russian economy is the defense spending. It looks good in the short term, but in the long term, it could be a problem. In fact, economists believe that Moscow could be in recession if it chooses to end the war. Our next report tells you why.
За Россию! За победу! Ура!
It's day 949 of the Ukraine war. The front lines remain unchanged. Fighting continues. Russian troops are making advances in the east. The Kiev army remains stuck in Kursk. It looks like the war isn't coming to an end anytime soon. But Ukraine has a different view. President Zelensky believes peace is closer than the world thinks. However, it seems Russia doesn't share the same viewpoint. It's preparing for a long war, and you can see it in its draft budget for the next year. Moscow is hiking its defense spending by 25% for 2025. It will rise to 13.5 trillion rubles, around $145 billion. defense spending will now make up for 32% of the 2025 budget. It will account for 6.3% of the GDP. This will be the highest level since the Cold War. Not just that, Russia is also focusing on national security. That's separate from national defense. It will spend 3.5 trillion rubles in 2025, which is about $38 billion. So put together, Moscow will spend 17 trillion rubles on just defense and security. That's a lot of money, and Russia needs to raise it from somewhere. So they have cut down spending in other sectors. Take social spending, for example. It's decreasing by 16% in the 2025 budget. Now, what Russia is doing is called military Keynesianism. It's spending money on the military to boost the economy. This is how it works. The government spends a lot on defense. These investments create more jobs. The money circulates through the economy. Overall demand goes up, and economic growth gets a temporary boost. We can see that with Russia, despite sanctions, the economy remains resilient. This year it will rise by over 3%. But here's the problem with this strategy. In the long run, it's not sustainable. That's because military spending cannot boost long-term productivity. The society can't benefit from it. In fact, it only diverts resources away from essential services. And that's already happening in Russia. So why then is Moscow doing it? It's because military spending is the only thing propping up the economy. Right now it may look resilient, but there are some warning signs. The first is inflation. Consumer prices rose by 9% this year compared to last year. In September, the Bank of Russia hiked interest rates. They are up to 19%. That's the highest since the Ukraine war began. There are currency problems too. Moscow is sanctioned by the West, and that means a limited access to dollars. Its oil revenue is also plunging. All of this doesn't paint a very good picture. In fact, economists believe the Ukraine war is the only thing preventing Russia from plunging into recession, which explains the mammoth defense spending this time. But can Russia sustain this? Moscow's budget deficit is going up. This year, it will be 1.7% of GDP. That's up from the projected figure of 1.1%. That means the government is spending more money than it's earning. While Russia believes it can live through anything, the reality begs to differ.
Now let's turn our attention to China. The country is celebrating its 75th National Day today. 75 years ago, on October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China. His communist forces defeated the earlier government and Mao founded a new state. China, as we know it today, was born on this day, 75 years ago, 3/4 of a century. That's quite a milestone. So what would you expect? Perhaps grand parades, giant banners and posters celebrating the glory of communist rule in China, people dressed up as giant Xi Jinping mascots. Well, perhaps not that, but you get the gist. You would think that the Chinese government would be having a massive party. On the contrary, celebrations this year were muted. There were some flag-raising ceremonies in Hong Kong, Macau, and Beijing's Tiananmen Square. You know, the places best associated with the joys of CCP rule. President Xi Jinping was relatively quiet too. It seems that he was just letting people enjoy the day. So how did this happen? Why is China's Communist Party so subdued? Well, because of the economy. Xi Jinping held a banquet last night. He gave a speech which did not really signal the best of times ahead. Here's a translated excerpt. This is what the Chinese president said. After 75 years of hard work, China's modernization has unfolded a magnificent picture and presented an extremely bright and brilliant prospect. At the same time, the road ahead will not be smooth. There will be definitely There will definitely be difficulties and obstacles, and we may encounter major tests such as high winds and rough seas or even stormy waves. That's not exactly the most celebratory speech, is it? Xi Jinping knows that the road ahead will be tricky as China continues to struggle economically. A few years ago, China was flying high, double-digit growth, record poverty reduction, a thriving manufacturing industry, and a booming real estate sector. That is what Xi Jinping inherited in 2013, when he became China's president. But then he worked some of his magic. A crackdown on dissent, a crackdown on businesses, tightening the iron fist around Hong Kong's neck, violent rhetoric about invading Taiwan, picking fights with every single neighboring country, and so on and so forth. Then came the Wuhan virus pandemic and Xi's brutal zero-COVID lockdowns. Is it any wonder then that economic growth is down? Consumer sentiment is at record lows. The property sector needs a massive bailout, and China could miss its 5% growth target this year. This isn't the 75th National Day that Xi wanted. Last week, we saw him desperately trying to turn things around by throwing money at the problem. China announced a stimulus package, which may or may not help jumpstart the economy. It's still too soon to tell. The stimulus has caused the stock market to surge. Yesterday, the Chinese markets made their largest single-day gains in 16 years, but the markets won't fix China's underlying problems, and Xi Jinping knows that. He gave his bleak speech after the record rally, so maybe expectations about the stimulus should be a bit tempered. And besides, it's not like Xi Jinping is changing his approach to geopolitics. Take a look at another part of his speech from last night.
Taiwan is China's sacred territory. People on both sides of the straits are related by blood, and blood is thicker than water. Achieving the complete reunification of our homeland is the common aspiration of the Chinese people, whether they are in China and abroad. It is an irreversible trend, a matter of justice, and it is in accordance with the will of the people. No one can stop the march of history.
Xi Jinping vowed to reunify Taiwan with the Chinese mainland. He refuses to rule out the use of force, which means that instability will persist. Xi's belligerence will continue to hold China back, and his own actions will end up fulfilling his bleak prophecy. Our next story is somewhat similar to the last one. It's about Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation. It is Nigeria's Independence Day today. 64 years ago, they won their independence from the British. Today was supposed to be a day of celebration. Instead, it was marked by protests and police action. The protests were against bad governance in the country. Similar protests were held in the month of August for 10 days, but they fizzled out. Today, some people wanted to revive the demonstration, so they organized themselves online using the hashtag #FearlessInOctober. But the turnout was low. It seems despite the name, people were still afraid. And it turns out that those fears were justified. Here's our report.
A crowd had gathered in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. They had come out to protest against bad governance in Nigeria. The turnout wasn't big, but even so, the police were quick to take action. Tear gas was lobbed at the demonstrators. Roads were blocked, and the situation was handled. The protesters were not pleased.
Policemen here have started shooting tear gas. It's still early. It's still as early as we just came out here. But it's unfortunate that a nation that is 64 years of independence today is experiencing this level of lawlessness by the law enforcement agents.
Things went a bit better for protesters in Lagos, Nigeria's largest city and financial capital. Hundreds took to the streets of Lagos. They were demonstrating peacefully and singing Nigeria's old national anthem. The country changed the anthem in May, so singing the old one was an act of defiance. It was symbolic, considering that today is Nigeria's Independence Day. 64 years ago, the country overthrew the British. It should have been a day of celebration, But instead, the people of Nigeria were protesting against their government and its economic policies. Nigeria's government knows that the people are unhappy.
I am deeply aware of the struggles many of you face in these challenging times. Our administration knows that many of you struggle with rising costs and the search for meaningful employment. I want to assure you that your voices are heard. As your president, I assure you that we are committed to finding sustainable solutions to alleviate the suffering of our citizens.
This was from President Tinubu's speech today. Instead of celebrating independence, Tinubu was trying to placate the people. It shows just how bad the situation is. Tinubu became Nigeria's president last year, and he introduced a slew of economic reforms. He removed a fuel subsidy, increased electricity prices, and devalued Nigeria's currency, the naira. It led to the worst inflation in 28 years. This sparked public anger, and protests erupted in August. But the Nigerian government crushed those demonstrations. At least 21 people died, and 10 were charged with treason. So the protests fizzled out. They were supposed to restart today. Organizers were trying to rally people online, using hashtags like Fearless in October or Fearless October 1st. But it seems that this did not work, because the Nigerian state was prepared to induce fear. There are reports that some protest organizers were abducted and taken to Nigeria's capital. The military was deployed to assist the police in handling the protesters. The environment was meant to stifle dissent, and it seems to have worked. Protest organizers want the demonstrations to continue, but it won't be easy to draw sizable crowds. So if the people of Nigeria want the government to change, the ballot box seems to be their best option.
Before our next story tonight, let me ask you a question. Do you use an app to meditate? What about an app to increase your focus? Or do you wear a device like a smartwatch or a headset to sleep better or to reduce stress? Actually, it doesn't really matter what tool you use and why. If you have ever let technology inside your mind, this story is for you. You see, since the beginning of time, our innermost thoughts have been our own. No one can listen to them. And we take this for granted. But our thoughts may not be private for much longer thanks to technology, which is growing by leaps and bounds. There are brain apps, devices, and implants. They all promise to help us. So we sign up. And what happens next is this. These products monitor our brains. They analyze brainwave signals. They record brain data. They can encode virtually everything that goes on in our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, even our intentions and desires. And what happens to this data? Is it really used for the better? What if it is used for the worse? No one is sure. But if you live in the home of the Hollywood sign, one thing is certain. Now your brain can lawyer up. California has passed a new law. It aims to protect people's brain data, in other words, neural data. It will receive the same protections as other sensitive data, basically biometric information like facial images, DNA, and fingerprints. Thanks to this new law, users can limit the data that neurotech companies collect from them, and they can stop these companies from sharing the data with third parties. Experts are welcoming this law. After all, California is among the rare few taking brain privacy seriously. Earlier this year, Colorado passed a similar legislation. It was a first for the US. What about the rest of the world? In 2021, Chile became the first country to protect neuro data. Mental integrity was added to their constitution. It was a groundbreaking move. Last year, a Brazilian state passed a law to protect brain privacy rights. Some countries have made proposals, including Mexico, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Argentina. They want to enshrine the right to mental privacy. So the examples are few and far between, and progress is slow. Meanwhile, tech is moving at breakneck speed. You have startups helping people control Alexa with their minds. You have billionaires funding brain implants. Look at Elon Musk's Neuralink. Do you know their big mission? To let people share thoughts telepathically. It's the stuff of superhero movies. Then there is non-invasive brain technology. Meta and Snapchat are working on it. Apple is patenting a futuristic AirPod that can scan your brain activity through your ears. Scientists have also built AI brain decoders to translate unspoken thoughts into text. This is enough to make your head spin. And don't get us wrong, neurotech is very fascinating. It can be helpful, even life-changing, but the question still remains, who is regulating this technology? All kinds of companies are building giant treasure troves of data. They're mining through billions of brain waves, and according to studies, many of them are selling this data. It's like the wild, wild west. Why? Because neurotechnology may help our health. But these products do not always qualify as medical devices, so they don't have to follow health rules. And there aren't enough tech innovation rules either. Look at social media, for instance. These giants are collecting our data, all kinds of data, and they're also reportedly selling it. But our policies are still playing catch up with them, even though this technology is about 2 decades old. So if we can't even manage social media, how are we planning to handle something as advanced as neurotechnology? It's a question that we have to answer. Because with unregulated neurotech, much like our thoughts, our worst fears may not stay in our heads. They could be our reality. Climbing Mount Everest has always been a tough task, but now it's only getting tougher because the Everest is getting taller. We're not kidding. Mount Everest is a geological marvel. This Himalayan peak is more than 29,000 feet tall, making it the world's tallest mountain. But according to a new study, it is only getting taller by about the width of a strand of spaghetti each year. Why? Because 89,000 years ago, one river ate another. Confused? Here's our report.
This is Mount Everest, a Himalayan peak, a geological marvel, and a potentially lethal climbing challenge. But guess what? With each passing year, this challenge is only getting tougher. You already know that the Everest is staggeringly tall. At 29,032 feet, it's about 800 feet taller than other Himalayan peaks like K2, Kanchenjunga and Lhotse. Everest is the world's tallest mountain, and it's getting taller. It grows by several millimeters each year. That's about the width of a strand of spaghetti. This may not sound like much, but over the last 89,000 years, the mountain has risen by up to 164 feet, and it continues to grow. Why? Because of what happened 89,000 years ago. But to understand that, let's go back further in history, to about 50 million years ago when the Everest was formed. There was a giant clash among the tectonic plates. The tectonic plate India rests on crashed into the Eurasian plate and then started descending below it. So one plate was slightly on top of the other, and the crust crumbled. This created the Himalayas. Now the Earth's crust may seem rigid, but it's not. So when something this massive, like a mountain range, weighs down the crust, it goes downward. And what's below the crust? The mantle. This is buoyant, so it pushes the crust upward. Think of it this way. The Himalayas are standing on a massive bouncy castle, which pushes them up and down. This happens gradually. But 89,000 years ago, something fascinating happened. The Arun River, which lies east of Everest, changed its course. It bumped into a river flowing north of the Everest and stole its water. Combined, the two rivers were a water giant, and they grew more erosive. They were washing away billions of tons of sediments. This wreaked havoc in the bouncy house below the Everest. It changed the topography and pushed the mountain upwards. We are still seeing the effects of this, and scientists say the Everest's growth spurt will continue for millions of years, then it will gradually stop. because the Himalayas rise and fall, just like all mountain ranges, thanks to the so-called bouncy house, which comes with magical height-increasing perks.
New York has a rat problem. The subways and alleys are infested by these creatures. By some accounts, there are 3 million rats in New York. It's a serious public health issue, but do not worry. The local officials have a solution. Birth control pills for rats. That's right. Rodent contraception is apparently the way to go here. These pills will be placed in certain parts of the city. The hope is that the rats will nibble away at them. And if they do, they will end up sterilized. I guess rats have more reproductive freedom than American women. Many US states won't let women buy birth control pills, but in New York, the rats are getting it for free. It's depressingly funny, to be honest. And the internet agrees. I wonder who will fight for the unborn rat babies.
Whoa, 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 hey, 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 hey!
Thank you!
I will do everything within my power to end the scourge of abortion once and for all.
I'd like to see this medication off the market to protect the unborn.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. A Russian fighter jet flies dangerously close to an American F-16 near Alaska. A deadly fire engulfs a school bus in Thailand, killing more than 23 people. And South Korea showcases its military prowess as missiles and tanks roll through central Seoul. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1918, Arab forces captured Damascus from the Ottomans. They were led by a British soldier called T.E. Lawrence. His military strategy and role in this revolt solidified his status as a hero. He became known as the Lawrence of Arabia. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, But above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America. We begin in the Middle East, where Israeli forces have launched a ground operation in southern Lebanon, marking another escalation in their ongoing offensive against Hezbollah. This comes just days after Israel killed Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah in airstrikes on Lebanon's capital, Beirut. And announcing the ground offensive, the Israeli Defense Forces said the incursion would be limited, localized, and based on precise intelligence.
In accordance with the decision of the political echelon, a few hours ago, the IDF began limited, localized, and targeted ground raids based on precise intelligence against Hezbollah terrorist targets and infrastructure in southern Lebanon. These targets are located in villages close to the border and pose an immediate threat to Israeli communities in northern Israel.
The IDF hasn't given an exact timeline on how long the invasion is expected to last. However, the Israeli army says soldiers have been in preparation for months. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he wants the displaced Israelis to return to their homes in northern Israel, which borders Lebanon.
The elimination of Nasrallah is a necessary condition in achieving the objectives we have set, returning the residents of the north safely to their homes, and changing the balance of power in the region for years. As long as Nasrallah was alive, he would have quickly rebuilt the capabilities we took from Hezbollah. Therefore, I gave the directive, and Nasrallah is no longer with us.
Netanyahu has warned Iran against helping its proxy Hezbollah, saying that there's no place in the Middle East that Israel cannot reach.
There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss.
Now, the Iran-backed group that could announce its next leader any day now said that it targeted Israeli soldiers in several border areas with rockets and artillery shelling. And Lebanese citizens said Hezbollah remains strong even after Nasrallah's death.
In my opinion, there is only a small possibility that Israel will be able to penetrate because the resistance remains strong. And if Syed Hassan Nasrallah is gone, there are thousands of alternatives to Hassan Nasrallah.
The contradiction in the slogans raised by Netanyahu between returning the settlers to the north, removing the threat, and changing the face of the region through a ground incursion reveals the truth of the slogans presented by Netanyahu, which are an escape from the great failure that occurred in Gaza as a result of his inability to achieve the so-called absolute victory in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu resorted to this step and is trying to push things further forward.
Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin spoke to Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and extended support for Israel's ground operation, saying the country has the right to defend itself.
I spoke with Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant today to discuss security developments and Israeli operations. I made it clear that the United States supports Israel's right to defend itself. We agreed on the necessity of dismantling attack infrastructure along the border to ensure that Lebanese Hezbollah cannot conduct October 7-style attacks on Israel's northern communities.
Secretary Austin also warned Tehran of serious consequences if it decides to launch a direct attack on Israel. With Washington's backing, Israel is expected to continue its operations against Hezbollah as the Lebanese people face the risk of an all-out war with no place to go. And here in the United States, in the race for the White House, former President Donald Trump has accused President Biden and Vice President Harris of not providing any support to storm-ravaged communities in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. The ex-president questioned the authenticity of a photo posted on Harris's social media account showing her engaged in official duties aboard Air Force Two. In the photo, Kamala Harris says she's talking with officials who briefed her about the impact of the hurricane that has already killed over 130 people so far. The post went viral with more than 40 million views in just 24 hours. With just over a month until voters elect a new president, everything that can become political will become political, especially and including hurricane recovery efforts. The Republican presidential nominee attacked his opponent on Truth Social, saying, quote, "Another fake and staged photo from someone who has no clue what she is doing. You have to plug in the cord into the phone for it to work," end quote. During a visit to hurricane-hit Georgia, Donald Trump said he spoke to billionaire Elon Musk about getting Starlink internet access to the affected areas.
They don't have communication. They don't have anything right now. We're trying to. I just spoke to Elon. I'm getting him. We want to get Starlink hooked up because they have no communication whatsoever. And throughout the region, our hearts are with you, and we are going to be with you as long as you need. It's called an hour of need. You're in our prayers, and we pray to God. And throughout the long weeks that lay ahead, you're going to have a lot of work, but the end result is it's going to be good.
Now, it's important to note the Federal Emergency Management Administration, or FEMA, is already working with Starlink to provide internet access to those hard-hit communities. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris canceled campaign stops on the West Coast to focus on recovery efforts. The Democratic presidential nominee says she herself plans to be on the ground as more than 3,000 personnel assist with recovery efforts in the storm's aftermath.
So far, more than 3,300 federal personnel are on the ground to assist with recovery efforts. They are deploying food, water, and generators. And we continue to work with teams on the ground to restore water and power as quickly as possible. I plan to be on the ground as soon as possible, but as soon as possible without disrupting any emergency response operations, because that must be the highest priority in the first order of business.
Hurricane Helene's destruction has completely upended the key battleground states of both Georgia and North Carolina. In fact, entire communities have been washed away, including homes and businesses. This will make for an uncertain voting infrastructure with just over 30 days to go until the election. And in a race shaped by uncertainty, the level of unknowns has only just been amplified. And staying with the race for the White House, Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz will step onto the stage for their one and only vice presidential debate. The two rivals have taken sharp jabs at each other in the past, and tonight, those simmering tensions could explode on stage. J.D. Vance, the Ohio senator, has courted controversy since his selection to the ticket was announced. His unapologetic style has turned heads and raised eyebrows. From calling Democratic women childless cat ladies to making bizarre claims about Haitian immigrants, Vance has often spread fake news. His fierce defense of Donald Trump and far-right stances on everything from reproductive rights to immigration has defined his campaign. Last week during a rally in Michigan, Vance promised to debate Walz like an adult as he mocked Kamala Harris.
What I'm going to try to show is very simple, that the candidacy, the team of substance, the team that actually has a record that we're proud of instead of we're running away from, and the team that actually has a plan is the team of Trump-Vance. And that's what I'm going to try to do. Is look, I think one of the fundamental differences between Kamala Harris's campaign and Donald Trump's campaign is we speak to our fellow Americans like they're citizens, because they are. Kamala Harris speaks to her fellow Americans like they're children.
Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris running mate Tim Walz is also charged up for the debate. The two-term Minnesota governor is characterized as a happy warrior and is known for being a great orator. Walz has also taken shots at Vance during multiple rallies and has even called the Ohio senator weird and creepy, which really caught on with the American electorate. Still, with all that going on for the former congressman, he still admits his nervousness heading into such a dramatic moment. Right before the debate, Walz visited the battleground state of Michigan and met with voters.
Looking forward to tomorrow, but my thoughts are certainly in the Southeast.
A recent New York Times Siena College poll released on Saturday found that Midwestern voters prefer Walz to Vance. While Walz was viewed favorably by 44% of voters, Vance was viewed unfavorably by 48%. Now, vice presidential debates rarely shape the race for the White House. However, this year could be a turning point as Waltz and Vance both look to influence undecided voters.
And after the presidential debate that we watched, we didn't see polls shift a whole lot, even though that debate was fairly explosive and had some pretty, memeable moments. It didn't shift things all that much. So I wouldn't expect this to do much. That being said, we know that this is a very, very, very close race. And so thought about from another perspective, you have maybe 5 or 6% of the electorate still on the fence, still undecided, and little things could push them in one direction or another.
So, as the lights go up at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York, the stakes couldn't be higher. Will Vance's bombastic style overpower Waltz, or will the Minnesota governor's calm resilience carry him through? Considering the CBS moderators have already announced they will not be fact-checking the candidates in real time, what happens tonight is anyone's guess, just like everything else undergirding the 2024 election. And now on to Europe, where more than 100 years ago, the world's first coal plant opened in the United Kingdom in 1882. And today the country becomes the first major economy to give up on the fossil fuel. Britain's last coal-burning power plant has officially shut down, signaling a bold shift toward renewable energy. But as the UK bids goodbye to coal, many other countries are still deeply reliant on it. What does this mean for the global fight against climate change? Here's the story with more.
Britain's skies will look different today. The smoke that once billowed from towering chimneys is gone. And with it, a chapter of history has closed. The Ratcliffe-on-Soar power plant, which was the last coal-burning giant in the UK, has gone dark. And the country that was once known to be the birthplace of coal power now becomes the first major economy to give it up. But its shutdown came with a dark price. For years, coal was the beating heart of Britain's power. It fueled factories, drove trains, and kept homes warm. But as the world burned it in enormous quantities, our planet began to suffer. Wildfires raged, oceans rose, and storms grew fiercer. And coal, the cheap and abundant fuel, rapidly became the dirtiest source of energy. The UK felt this tension sharply, and by 2013, coal mines began to close. The science behind climate change became clearer, and the urgency to change direction grew stronger. Hence, renewables, once a small fraction of Britain's energy mix, began to take centre stage. Today, over 40% of the UK's electricity comes from wind, solar and other clean sources. It's a remarkable shift for a nation that once produced nearly all its power from coal. Moreover, not only the Green campaigners, but the final coal-fired station's shutdown has also been hailed by its workers, because the ones who have dedicated years to build the coal plant now were given support, retraining and a secured future. This wasn't just an ending, it was a transition to something new. But while Britain turns a page, the coal story isn't over. In places like China and India, coal still burns brightly. In 2022, the world used a record 8.5 billion metric tons of coal, driven largely by these two powerhouses. Yet, there's hope on the horizon. China's coal consumption might peak as soon as it invests in renewables. But the global reliance on coal remains a steep hill to climb. So, as the lights go out at Ratcliffe and the last plume of coal smoke disappears into history, Britain has set an example for the world. A testament to the power of innovation and the urgency of change, even if it means taking 142 years to stop using coal. But the fight isn't over. The planet is still in peril, and the race to protect it continues. So now it's up to the rest of the world to how they wish to write the next chapter.
And finally, in Argentina, thousands of parrots have invaded a vibrant town on the country's Atlantic coast, causing power outages along with other problems. Despite attempts by locals to scare the birds away using loudspeakers and laser lights, the resilient birds remain undeterred. Environmental watchers say this is a consequence of deforestation, which has driven flocks of parrots closer to human settlements. Our final report goes into detail.
Let's talk about parrots, with their dazzling green, yellow, and red feathers. They seem to have all the charm and grace to turn any dull landscape into a vibrant masterpiece. But, as beautiful as they are also wreaking havoc on Hilario Ascasubi, a town nestled along Argentina's eastern Atlantic coast. These colorful avian invaders have descended by the thousands, and the locals are at their wits' end, trying to rid themselves of these feathered troublemakers. Take a casual stroll around the town, and you will be greeted by a riot of color. Hundreds of parrots perched on electricity cables, swooping through the skies, and filling the air with constant chattering. But don't be fooled by their picturesque presence. These cheeky birds aren't just sitting pretty. They're biting through power lines, leaving the town in darkness more times than they can count. Not to mention the poop. With so many of them around, it's not just the lights and fans that are going out. It's the sheer amount of droppings that are turning the town into a minefield of bird waste.
The internet shuts down and you're disconnected. You have to call the company that services you, and that takes a while. They do it as fast as they can, but you are disconnected for a while, and we can't report or keep in touch. My radio show cuts out because without internet, it doesn't broadcast any other way. They bite and damage the cables. Water can then get into the wires when it rains and transmission is cut off. These parrots create daily costs and problems for us. It goes without saying that when the power goes out, there is no radio.
The people of Hilario Ascasubi aren't exactly thrilled to share their town with these unwanted guests. In fact, they've tried everything to get rid of them, blasting loud noises, flashing laser lights, you name it. But the parrots, in all their colorful defiance, have proven to be tougher than they look. Now, before we paint these parrots as villains, let's rewind a bit. This invasion isn't entirely their fault. Experts say the birds originally sought shelter in the town during autumn and winter, before migrating south to the cliffs of Patagonia for breeding season in the summer. But the rapid disappearance of forests and hills has left these parrots with nowhere else to go. Argentina has seen a significant decline in forest cover, forcing these once wild birds to inch closer and closer to human settlements.
In the immediate future, we need to start to restore our natural environments, start recovering the hill environments, but until that happens, we have to think of strategies that allow us to live together in the most harmonious way possible in our towns.
Now, the parrots and people are stuck in a situationship that neither of them signed up for.
Burrowing parrots depend almost exclusively on the hillsides. Historically, they have fed on the food resources provided by this environment. Currently, the hillsides are disappearing. Estimates say that 4% of the forest is lost annually in the south of the province of Buenos Aires. It is causing the parrots to have no food available, and they are increasingly moving closer to the cities, where they find food, shelter, and water.
So, while the residents of Hilario Ascasubi battle it out with their avian adversaries, it's hard not to see the irony. In their relentless pursuit of expansion, humans have pushed nature to the brink, only to find themselves at the mercy of creatures they can't control. Nature, no matter how small or vibrant, always finds a way to remind us who's really in change.
That's all we have time for today. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. Hello and welcome. Our top focus is on Kenya. The United Nations Security Council has extended the deployment of a Kenya-led security mission to the Caribbean nation of Haiti for a year. The mission, called the Multinational Security Support, or the MSS, was authorized last October to assist the violence-hit Haiti's police force. Kenya volunteered to lead the policing mission and secured a UN authorization. It pledged to deploy 1,000 police officers in the Caribbean nation. However, it currently has around 400 police officers on the ground. Nairobi says the number is expected to grow to around 2,500.
With the renewed mandate, the mission is poised to create the conditions for the Haitian authorities to secure the country and undertake social and economic reconstruction. But for this to happen, the MSS must rapidly achieve its envisaged full deployment of 2,500 personnel, up from the current 410 officers. However, the deployment and sustained operations of the mission require substantial resources.
Other nations part of the mission include Jamaica, the Bahamas, Antigua and Barbuda, Bangladesh, Benin, Chad and Guinea. Now, this is not a UN-led peacekeeping mission. The calls for turning the Kenya-led mission into a UN-led mission have met with resistance. These calls, backed by the US, were dropped from Monday's UN Security Council resolution due to opposition from Russia and China. The two countries, which hold veto power on the Council, said the multinational police mission should be given more time to establish itself. They also called on the Kenya-led mission to hasten the process of restoring peace in the Caribbean nation. The 15-member UNSC, however, unanimously called on all nations to provide additional voluntary contributions and support to the mission. The renewal of the mission comes as gang violence continues in the tiny Caribbean nation of Haiti. Though gangs have long existed in Haiti, the situation worsened after the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021. The gangs then tightened their grip and used looting, rape, kidnappings and killings as a way to assert their power. They now control 80% of the capital Port-au-Prince. As per the UN, at least 3,661 people have been killed in Haiti in the first half of this year. Nearly 580,000 people have been displaced due to gang violence. The Kenya-led mission aims to restore order in the nation, make the environment suitable for aid delivery, and to create conditions for free and fair elections. Kenya has a history of sending peacekeepers to volatile regions, including Mozambique, Namibia, Liberia, and Somalia. However, this is the first time the nation sent forces to a different continent. Many analysts see this as a way for Nairobi to raise its global profile. Kenya is eyeing to become a dependable ally that is willing to help other countries. However, deploying forces to other parts of the world has not been favored by all Kenyans. Kenya's opposition has accused President William Ruto's government of failing to secure his own country first. They also say authorities are deploying police in contradiction to the constitution, which allows only military deployments. As per reports, the MSS mission has helped the Haitian police achieve some success in retaking areas in the capital of Port-au-Prince. However, these successes are limited. Will a renewed Kenya-led mission fulfill its goal? And how will it benefit Nairobi? Now, for more on this, we have with us Dismas Makua, who is a political risk analyst, joining us live from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Now, what are the primary objectives of the Kenyan-led multinational force in Haiti, and how have they evolved since the initial deployment?
Well, number one, Kenya is a very strong democracy, and Kenya has got a strong constitution. So initially, when the UN and the United States requested Kenya to come up and support this, there was a mixed reaction, and in fact, authorities were taken to courts, and the process was delayed for a while. But eventually, the High Court gave the green light, and the mission was deployed to Haiti. And really, the principal reason for their mission is to assist the Asian authorities come up with a very strong law enforcement infrastructure. And at the moment you have a strong law enforcement structure, then it means you can easily assist in the gang fights. Number two, create an environment for peaceful and free and fair elections in Haiti. And number three, give the Haitians security of mind so that they can go on with their businesses. And the Kenyan mission then started doing their preparations. So in fact, the team that you have in Haiti is not the normal police officers. These are specialized police officers with very superior training, and they've got capacity to deal with gangs. They've got capacity to set up the law enforcement infrastructure, and also they've got capacity to engage in citizen and stakeholder participation.
Right. And Dismas, how has the presence of the Kenyan troops impacted the security situation in Haiti, particularly in relation to the gang violence and the overall stability?
Well, according to reports from Haiti and according to reports from the United Nations as well as the Kenyan Police Service, from the time they arrived, they've made very good progress in managing the gangs. So they've had a very fierce engagement with the gangs, and they've prevailed. So they've restored security in many parts of Port-au-Prince. And then number two, they're working now with other members of the multinational team to ensure that there are very structured and agile conversations between the key players. Because for this mission to be a success, while you've got the mission there from Kenya and other countries, but really the solution is within from the local authorities, as well as the key stakeholders, as well as the citizens and partners. So they've created for that kind of conversation to take place. And when President Ruto visited Haiti a few days ago, he gave out a very good report card that they've made very good progress. However, more needs to be done. So far, we've got about 400 specialized police officers. Ideally, the number is supposed to be 2,500. And on top of that, the mission is facing three challenges. Number one is capacity, meaning that they don't have sufficient funds for their resources, and also they do not have equipment. But Kenya is ready to support according to the analysts as well as the leadership in Kenya, Kenya has put on Gear 5. And as soon as the capacity is made available in terms of equipment as well as funding, then the number will be up to 2,500. And also there's been conversations on why Kenya decided to support this mission, and also been conversations that in fact such a mission has not taken place outside Kenya. But Kenya has got experience both from for the military officers as well as the police officers. And Kenya being a responsible global player, when you are called upon to go and support your neighbor whether it's a neighbor down the road or in another continent, then you create an environment for you to do so. And also there are some critics and analysts who have said that you need to sort out the issues back at home before you go to an international level. And in a theory that is perfect, but there is no country in the world that has sorted out, issues of law enforcement back at home, and they've got a clean check. So it's possible for the Kenyan authorities to make sure that Kenya is secured, and at the same time give helping to the neighbor.
Right, Dismas. And what are the implications of extending the Kenyan troops' mandate for another year, both for Haiti and for Kenya's international relations and domestic policies?
Well, I see it from threefold. It means that Kenya will have the opportunity to engage in ideas cross-pollination and learn from best practices. So you'll have many more Kenyan specialized police officers being trained for the international assignment. So at the end of the day, Kenya will have a very big pool of experienced and knowledgeable specialized officers and capacity maybe for future missions. Now, everybody in Kenya is agreed that going to Haiti was in fact a good thing. Initially, there was a lot of skepticism as to whether it was going to be a success. Initially, people feared that the Kenyan specialized police officers will be coming in body bags, but with time, there is now evidence that in fact they are doing a very good job. And then obviously at an international level, Kenya is earning international credentials. Kenya is enhancing its international relations, and this is because when President Ruto took office, he said he's going to come up with a very agile foreign policy, and it appears to me that this is part of it. That when you're a dependable international player and you are called upon to support an international mission, then you are available. Obviously, from a marketing and a brand perspective, when Kenya sent out the mission, then Kenya has been part of the global conversation. So one would imagine that every citizen in the world knows that there's a country called Kenya, and Kenya is a dependable global player.
Dismas, thank you very much for being with us on the show and for sharing your views. Very much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Moving on to North Africa's Libya. Ending an impasse, Libya has appointed a new central bank chief under a UN-backed deal. The move is likely to ease the ongoing political divisions in the country over the control of the central bank. Libya's two rival governments, based in the east and the west, have agreed to appoint Naji Mohamed Issa Belkacem as the new central bank governor. Members of Libya's east-based parliament unanimously voted for the approval on Monday, and Libya's Tripoli-based government in the west is also signatory to the UN-backed deal. The new governor is likely to name a board of directors within 10 days. Since 2014, Libya is governed by two rival administrations. UN-recognized Tripoli-based government led by Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibeh in the west, and Benghazi-based government led by Libyan military leader Khalifa Haftar in the east. Now, Libya's central bank has been at the center of the conflict, more so in recent years. Both of the sides want control over the bank. Now, this is because Libya's central bank dominates its economy. It not only owns the two main commercial banks, but also holds $27 billion in reserves, most of it from oil revenues. It is also the only globally recognized depository for Libyan oil revenues, which is a vital source of income for the war-torn country. Now, tensions escalated in August when Libya's Western government replaced the veteran central bank governor Sadiq al-Kabir. He had been at the helm of the central bank since October 2011. Following the NATO-backed uprising that ousted dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Now, during his tenure, al-Kabir gained considerable power, but he also faced criticism over his handling of Libya's oil revenues. His removal, however, was rejected by the country's eastern-based administration. It called the move illegitimate. In response, the eastern faction halted oil flows across Libyan oil fields in protest. The move aimed to starve the Western-based government of revenues. Now, the production halt by the East halved Libya's crude oil output and significantly reduced exports. The United Nations officials held talks with the rival governments to defuse tensions. Last Thursday, they reached a deal to unanimously appoint a new governor that could pave the way for the bank to restore Libya's vital oil production. Now, Libya's central bank crisis has deeply affected its economy, as 90% of Libya's income depends on oil. So the standoff has threatened to freeze the economy. It has disrupted state salaries, and ordinary Libyans have faced the brunt of the financial chaos. Will the latest agreement turn out to be a breakthrough in the political standoff? And shifting focus to Angola now, where billionaire Isabel dos Santos, the daughter of longtime former Angola President José Eduardo dos Santos, has been hit by a fresh legal setback. Isabel dos Santos, who is Africa's first female billionaire, has lost an appeal in London's High Court to access $778 million of her frozen assets. In December of 2023, London's High Court ordered a worldwide freeze of up to $735 million of dos Santos' assets in response to a lawsuit by Angola's telecom operator Unitel. Now, dos Santos is under fire over a case of unpaid loans that Unitel, under her tenure as the company director in 2012 and 2013, granted to a Dutch company, Unitel International Holdings, or UIH. According to the London's Court of Appeal, the UIH is owned and controlled by dos Santos herself. Now, Unitel's lawyer says that the loans granted by dos Santos to her Dutch company were not repaid, and that the UIH owes over $400 million to the Unitel. Dos Santos has denied these charges and has claimed that she is a victim of a campaign of oppression by Angola's current government. Isabel dos Santos is the eldest daughter of Angola's former president, José Eduardo dos Santos, who ruled the country from 1979 to 2017. Starting in 1997 until 2017, while her father ran the poor but resource-rich Angola, Isabel dos Santos became the most influential business person in the country. She had stakes in the country's strategic industries, including diamonds, cement, banking, and telecoms. In 2017, her father, President José Eduardo dos Santos, stepped down from Angola's presidency after ruling the country for 38 years. Soon, the government, led by the new Angola president, João Lourenço, began cracking down on the alleged corrupt business practices by Isabel dos Santos. In January of 2020, Angolan authorities charged dos Santos with embezzlement and froze her assets in the country. In the same month, leaked documents dubbed Luanda Leaks said that Isabel dos Santos made her fortune through exploiting her own country's resources by deploying her family's political power for her business interests. Now, following the Luanda leaks in February of 2020, Portugal, the former colonial power of Angola, seized dozens of dos Santos' bank accounts in the country. In 2021, Forbes magazine dropped Isabel dos Santos from the list of Africa's richest people, and Forbes named her Africa's richest woman in the year 2013 with an estimated $3.5 billion net worth. In November of 2022, Interpol issued a warrant for her arrest, but she has not been detained anywhere in the world. People in Angola have also raised questions over the wealth amassed by Isabel dos Santos. Citizens in the country have been calling upon national and international authorities to make her face the consequences.
Isabel dos Santos is only paying for what she did throughout all these years. If she got rich illegally, then she must pay for it because everyone that commits a crime must be responsible for their actions. So if she was part of this corruption scheme, then she must suffer the consequences.
Isabel dos Santos' business empire is now a shadow of what it once was. With corruption charges against her in Angola, Assets frozen by courts in 3 different nations. A lot is yet to emerge in what has been reported as the textbook case of how to loot a country. We will continue to keep track of the latest on this story from Angola. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Nigeria has launched a bold new initiative in its fight against malnutrition. It is fortifying bouillon cubes with essential nutrients like iron, zinc, folic acid, and vitamin B12. These everyday seasoning cubes, found in almost every Nigerian kitchen, will now serve a dual purpose, adding flavor while delivering vital vitamins and minerals to millions. This innovative move aims to boost the health of families struggling with limited access to nutritious food. Our next report has all the details.
In kitchens across Nigeria, something simple but powerful has been on the burner. Authorities have rolled out new standards to fortify bouillon cubes with 4 key micronutrients: iron, zinc, folic acid, and vitamin B12. These small concentrated blocks, which are used to season soups and stews, are found in nearly every Nigerian home. And now they will do more than just add flavor, they will help fight malnutrition.
Fortification is important because it is the most cost-effective way of adding micronutrients that are missing in the diet for the consumer to be able to have them delivered to them through the fortified food products.
Across Africa, bouillon cubes are a staple. In Nigeria, Senegal, Ivory Coast and Cameroon, nearly 100% of households use them every day. In a country where many can't afford nutritious food, fortified bouillon cubes provide a cost-effective way to deliver essential nutrients to millions.
The fortified bouillon cube that they have promised to release to the market, it will be a huge advantage for the poor like us who cannot afford basic proteins. We will appreciate the fortified bouillon cubes, and they should try and release it to the market on time. And we have been informed that it contains folic acid and vitamins.
Malnutrition is a silent crisis in Nigeria, where a lack of essential vitamins and minerals lead to weakened immune systems, stunted growth and poor health outcomes. These deficiencies are not just statistics, they affect everyday life. People get sick more often, children struggle to learn, and adults find it harder to work and provide for their families. Fortified bouillon cubes offer a way to address this on a massive scale, improving health with a product that's already part of daily meals.
The kinds of food I eat now are EBA, drinking of the cassava flakes, fufu, spaghetti, ponmo, and this is only because I have a son who caters for my needs since I stopped working due to my strength.
However, food fortification is not new in Nigeria. The country has been fortifying salt with iodine and wheat flour, sugar and edible oils with vitamin A for years. Large-scale food fortification is being embraced by global health organizations like the Gates Foundation, which sees it as a vital tool to increase nutrients in food staples for low-income countries. So as these fortified cubes make their way into homes across Nigeria, they represent more than just a change in food regulation. They are a beacon of hope. Every meal prepared with these cubes now carries the potential to improve health, strengthen immunity and boost energy. For a country grappling with the challenges of malnutrition, fortified bouillon cubes offer a path forward, helping to build a healthier, stronger future for millions of people.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election. Explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.